California Agriculture Tech Workforce Initiatives, Robots, Workers, and Regulation, coming to you right now.
Thanks for joining after lunch. I'm Connie Bowen. I manage an investment firm called Farmhand Ventures. We invest in what I call the future of work in agriculture, so solutions for growers that include actually farmers and farm workers. And today's panel, I know nothing sounds more exciting than regulation in the title. We've kind of put all the words in the title of this panel for some reason. But I'm joined by an awesome panel that I'm going to let introduce themselves in a second. But today we're going to talk about really the importance of farm workers in the robotics conversation and how that relates to, or how we really see that playing out in California in particular. And so without further ado, we've got Karen Aceves, Ann Visser, Pete Donlin, Oscar Garcia all joining us. I'm going to pass it to you guys each to do kind of a 2-ish minute intro to say who you are, who you're working with, working for, and also why you care about ag robotics, how that's relevant to you in your work. So Karen, want to kick us off?
Sure. Thanks, Connie. Karen Aceves. I'm CEO of Arkin Strategies. Our mission is to build connected, resourced communities, and we do that through workforce, educational partnerships, housing, anything that provides economic mobility to communities across California. One of those initiatives is building workforce programs for farm workers and really changing the educational system so that we make sure that as farm workers are first to be automated through robotics, that they're first in line for opportunities in education, and it translates into economic mobility for them. We launched our Cornerstone program in the Central San Joaquin Valley, the Ag System Certificate, and it's the first of its kind certificate based on mastery of skills, not time in a classroom. It's the only program of its kind in California, built through conversations with industry and 12,000 farm worker survey. And so we've now started to scale that program statewide. So why robotics is important? I think it's an opportunity to increase people's opportunities within the ag industry. It's an opportunity for economic mobility for a lot of our farm workers. Farm work is hard, and many people put their lives on the line for it. And so if we can make it better, if we can make it cleaner, I think robotics and automation is the solution to that.
Great. My name is Ann Visser, and I'm a professor of community regional development in the College of Ag over at UC Davis. As a social scientist, I've always been interested in the questions of how do you develop regions, businesses, workforces to get ready to respond to shocks. And so those types of shocks can be anything throughout my career. I've done war and post-conflict, but I've also done things like regulation changes, policy changes, recessions, natural disasters. And in the last 6 years, I've had the pleasure of directing the Labor and Automation in California initiative, which is a multi-campus research initiative through the UC, which is focused at how do we get our producers and our workforce ready for the new tech coming in. And I also chair the USDA's multi-state project on building resilient rural communities and transformative responses to disruption. Basically, the big questions we're asking is how do we get the adaptive resilience of rural and agricultural economies ready for these change of ag techs coming in? We know that this is not just about workforce preparation, but this is a regional planning question. It's an economic development question. It is an infrastructure question. And so we get in to understand what those are and what are the systems, the policies, the resources that these regions need to be able to become resilient to these changes. And then also we look at how do you build the innovative capacities of various actors within this system. And so I have focused over the last 5 years at the micro level of the farm and producers, trying to really understand and chart out for regions what the farm of the future needs to look like in California so that we are ready to respond when the tech comes.
Hi there, I'm Pete Donlin, Vice President at Missionero. At Missionero, we grow leafy greens, all value added, so everything that we grow goes through a plant and is prepared for either food service or retail. And we do that in the Salinas Valley and in Yuma, Arizona. So we have a seasonal component to our labor, which is, I think, is pretty standard. Looking at ag tech for solutions in our processing plant as well as in the field. And I think echoing the economic development for our workforce, our workforce is great. It's a scarce resource. So agro-robotics is important to us just from the scarcity of labor, from the consistency of quality. The other thing that's really important to understand is our business is a very, very low margin business. And we need to look at ways where it makes sense to replace costly labor with more efficient processes and solutions, and that's one of the real reasons that I'm very interested in the process. And again, it's not about, nobody loses in this. The workforce wins. Should be more technical positions. We have problems, and we're a small company, but we're doing our hiring for Yuma right now, and we have a horrible time, filling out the number of positions we need to. So it's a very important thing for us to stay involved in.
My name is Oscar Garcia. My area of specialization is in leadership and organizational change. I have been working in human resources as head of the department, as Chief Human Resources Officer for large organizations for more than 20 years. Today, I am the CEO of Alliance, a HR management group, which is a vertically integrated talent management company where we offer consulting in organizational design, talent management, succession planning, workers' comp, and so on and so forth. But we also have a line of business in farm labor contracting and staffing management. We have been partnering with multiple organizations, including private equity firms, private investors, in due diligence process or talent management processes after the closure of the transactions. The relevance of innovation, technology, and robotics in my kind of business is trying to Pete's point, labor availability is scarce, even for farm labor contracting, and we need to find ways on how we expand the talent pool by creating opportunities for all people regarding even gender, race, and so forth, and also physical strength. As we know, the farm or the work that is performed in the farms is very demanding on the body, and many farm workers are teaching and encouraging their kids not to go and work in the farms because it's a difficult job to do. So we need to create a kind of a different way of doing things that is less demanding in terms of rural strength and brings kind of a more equality and uniform way of doing things through technology, robotics, and so forth. That will expand the talent pool. That will also bring more job satisfaction to the employees. That will also probably reduce accidents in the fields and so forth. So technology and robotics is extremely important when it comes to talent management.
Awesome. So as you can see, we've got a really diverse set of experts here. I want to start with we won't go into like too much detail on this, but just level set where we're at, and a little bit of kind of context for where we've been, because I'll give a starter, and then I think probably pass it to Pete to start us, and we can keep moving through. But everyone's been talking about automation in agriculture for like a really long time, actually. And I find, as someone who lives probably more on the tech side, but more, hopefully, engaged on the production side than your average tech person, a lot of the tech conversation kind of glances over some of the details of what's working versus what's not working, and specifically as pertains to ag tech and workforce integration. So maybe, Pete, tell us a little bit, you've been in the leafy green business for a minute. I'm sure you've talked about innovation for a long time, and then with varying degrees of success. Kind of where have we been in terms of California workforce availability and its integration, or lack thereof, with tech, and kind of where are we at right now?
Well, on our processing side, we've been more successful at applying tech. We've got kind of automation and technology for sorting product that used to be very, very labor intensive and not very effective. But the issues, I mean, it's a painful process, and I hope I'm answering your question. It's a painful process as this stuff comes in and you're transitioning from a very manual process to a technical process, because the maintenance of the equipment, the operation of the equipment, it's hard to prepare your team, and that's something that I would really encourage that we focus more on in this journey, is kind of the training package of the equipment. The demos go great. The people performing the demos leave. General installation is like a 1 to 2 day process. Those people leave the building and something happens, and everybody, including myself, are sitting there staring at each other, and you can't get product through the process. So I think it's the other thing, and these are all just very block and tackle things, is the parts packages of making sure that you've got the right amount of spare parts when you implement something. Because the one thing that we can't deal with is the downtime that's associated with the journey of jumping to the automation robotics technology.
To poke further, and then I'm going to throw this to you too, Oscar. Something I simplified like to talk about is robots, and most technology is pretty bad before it's good. And you've got this integration moment where actually the farm workers or line workers, wherever we are in the context, have kind of all the power. Has there been a time where something had, or how many times have there been, where you've tried to adopt something, it's been kind of crappy, and basically your workforce has said no?
Not so much. I mean, generally, our fear has been, do people, with it being so competitive to get labor, do people think you're going through a huge labor reduction, and it's a safe place to continue to work? But then you implement some of these things, and everybody kind of shifts around. So I haven't been. We've worried about that. I've not really been in a situation where. We haven't had the support of the workforce. I've been in situations where we've oversold what we're going to get out of it, and the workforce is kind of looking at you like, not that smart. But generally, where I've worked in our business, we try and engage our people really well so that we can kind of laugh at each other.
Oscar, you want to add anything to that? On your experience kind of with working, especially on maybe the FLC side, but also feel free to go back in time with other operating experiences of kind of challenges of tech integration with workforce. And then I'm going to throw this to you, Karen, a little bit to talk about when you've surveyed thousands of farm workers, some perceptions around that.
Yeah, no, it's been multiple occasions where more than not working, we are not extracting the full value because of a poor change management, transition management, difficult implementation. In these occasions, it is assumed by leadership that by making a decision at the top, everybody will align and adopt the technology, right? Because it is so clear the benefits for the business that everybody should have the exact same vision, right? Everybody should understand. And that's when I have seen these initiatives fail the most, when there's a full disconnect between the decision makers and the workforce in whatever implementation, and not just technology or robotics, but processes or anything that you want to change in the ways of working. If you don't do your due diligence by asking the end user and participating in the development of the decision and how to go about implementing it, it's going to be difficult that you will extract the full value of the technology that you are trying to implement.
Yeah, I would just echo that and say, there's a sense of autonomy and self-efficacy that people need to have in order to create that change. In the farm worker survey, when we surveyed 12,000 farm workers, that's what we saw. People, and we got to be on the fields interviewing some and talking to people, and they said, I would love technology. What is it, and how do I get there? How do I get trained? I think it's the disconnect between the pathways too, the understanding what is my role with technology. Yeah. That is such a broad term. Who even knows what ag tech means? And this is probably the wrong panel to say that, but what does that even mean, right? That's going to look completely different across the board. So when you're telling someone, a farm worker especially, we have technology, what does that mean? And what is the threshold in learning, and how am I going to be empowered to learn? If we don't have answers to that, then there's no point. And so I think it's starting to define what technology means and how people integrate with it, but giving people that autonomy to be part of that solution too. How do you want to work with that? Pete mentioned it too. People they're looking at you a little funny when you implement technology, but where is the farm worker's role in saying this is how it could work better and making it work on farm? I don't know if there are those teams of organizational change and implementation on the ground at the farm worker level to get that buy-in yet. I don't know the answer to that.
I'm going to throw it to you, Ann, too, to get.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So to provide some context in how I'll go about this answer, the work that we do is both ethnographic in nature and economic in nature. So we spend an awful lot of times in the fields working alongside workers as these tech is coming in. We work with the ag tech companies. We live in these regions. I live in these regions. We spend hours and hours on farms working with the various aspects of the labor force, and everything these folks have said is true. I have watched tech integration go well, and I have watched tech integration go poorly. And in the situation where it's went well, I will say there's a couple key things that worked. There was a lot of end user input on the options to put in specific tech. So one example, you can talk about automated platforms. One automated platform had a step and another automated platform was flat. And in one case, it was a very large producing enterprise, they got the end user, so the farm workers' input before, and they basically said, we need a flat platform for how we pick this particular commodity. The other orchard, they went in with just the step, and sure enough, there was non-adoption of the platform with the step, and those platforms sit now in that farm unused. And so at the same time, what you see in these very successful strategies are farm managers, orchard managers who are managing this process like Oscar is describing. You are having conversations amongst the labor force, both amongst themselves, but also with management about what is ag tech, what's coming out. They're exposed to these technologies. And so, and I guess I shouldn't say bad, I would say it's just not the most optimal outcome sometimes of integrating technology. But there is definitely a need to get the end user buy-in and early if you want them to be successful on the farm for uptake.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to add one more piece just to set context before we get into kind of where we think we can go and problem solve. Because we've got regulation in here. I think most of us are probably aware of the Cal OSHA restrictions around autonomous tractors where workers are. I happen to sit on the industry advisory board, or a very long title for advisory board for that. And you've got this really clear division that exists where tech, everyone here has seen the promise of autonomy and just assume, just kind of to Pete and Oscar's point, that like we're just going to go along, everyone's just going to go along and get it. But you know, if we, and I would say in the past decade I've spent in this space, there's very little farm worker voice representation in tech rooms, and generally that's a group that has not been brought along or included in economic upside. And so we have this challenge now where you've got kind of a polarized setting, and we kind of can't get anywhere in terms of regulating in such a way that would be net beneficial for California agriculture and the people who work within it. And so I say that to highlight kind of, and you know, I'm sure everyone has listened to Walt or someone else here talk about cost of labor. We know cost of labor are a problem. We're not going to dwell on that too much right now. But we're at this point in kind of California agriculture where we're a little bit stuck. Like, we can go look at all these different robotics companies, we can try to do the same models we've been doing, but they're not really working. So first, let's have a little discussion about why we need them to work and where we think they can, there's opportunities to work. And Oscar, I'm gonna throw it to you first, because I think you have a bajillion interesting things to say on this. And then we'll continue to move on to kind of where we're going.
Yeah, no, I think robotics have to work. I mean, Pete highlighted two very critical factors. One of them is labor scarcity, right? And the second is margins. I mean, we are a very compressed supply chain where we all, right, from the retailer, the packer, the grower, and the farm level contractor, our margins are squeezed, and we need to find much more effective and efficient ways to do it, right? But I think we are ignoring a few things also in this whole conversation. We're talking about labor scarcity, and yet I don't see a lot of analysis or dialogue on how we break barriers in terms of gender segregation, for example. In our industry, it is physically demanding, and you can see male-dominated positions and female-dominated positions. Robotics could actually flatten the field for all. So if there's certain level of strength that it is needed, that it is more aligned to male positions, why don't we develop such a device that allows everybody, regardless your physical strength, to perform a given job? I'm thinking, and when we were discussing initially, pruning trees, right? So it is a male-dominated because you have to take the shears and then you need to take down some branches and so forth. We have been changing the paradigm that only male can do the job because there are very effective females in our crews. However, it is true that it is a little bit more demanding physically, right? So what can we do in order to make it easier and faster, by the way, right? I was having a conversation with my business partner, and we need to change the economic model or business model of the farm level contracting when it comes to pruning. Let's stop charging for people and let's start charging for trees, right, that are pruned. And let's develop a micro innovation that helps our crew members to do their job faster. So we can actually pay them more and then make more money for the business while at the same time saving money for the farmer. So it's that systemic view that I think is lacking, right? It's how do we bring all these people together to have the different inputs. The other thing is safety. Workers' comp is super expensive for growers, for farm level contractors. Is what kind of innovations can we develop in order to ensure that there's no need for ladders, right? And/or creating different working conditions that are easier on the body and that it is safer for our employees. So that's I just was walking around here and I see very cool innovations, right? top of the line, and I'm just not seeing enough effort to empower the employees.
Yeah, I think those are some really great examples of like, I guess non-obvious to folks who aren't in the weeds every day, opportunities for automation and technology. Actually, anyone else want to chime in on other opportunities you're seeing for that? Because like that list can continue to get added to.
No, I think the
Yeah.
touching on the safety is a big one.
I imagine also food safety opportunities exist there too, particularly in
Yeah.
leafy green context.
For
Yeah, yeah.
sure.
I'm also, you started to get a little bit into kind of the incentives on the employer side. There's also the incentives on the worker side in terms of compensation creativity. I don't know if anyone is seeing anything in that. I actually think we're like in pretty early days on figuring out how that can look. I mean, I know I have a portfolio company that does, it's called Scout. They do vineyard management, and they work a lot with vineyard management companies, but they're already integrating, it's AI vineyard management, right, to gloss over technology stuff. But they're thinking and working closely with the management companies to think about how they can actually shift margin by optimizing where to send the workforce at different points in time, and ensure that actually the workforce is directly compensated for that, including like managers on down. And I don't know of other companies who are thinking about that. I don't know if that's a part of the conversation. I know we've talked about like the financial element a little bit of kind of some of the training initiatives you're doing. I don't know if that's like I'm throwing you something that's like completely in the future, but I don't know if that's on the future docket for how you're thinking about things, or if it's come up yet.
It hasn't come up directly, but I think we're doing this big experiment, right? We're saying if we train people on the technologies, will they get paid more, or how will this be viewed? And just in even foundational skills, we're seeing workers immediately get pay bumps across the board. And so, yeah, that would be the hope and that would be the goal. But I think your point is well made. I think we need to be intentional about it and show everybody the value proposition, not just the employer, but the worker. And I think. My friend here from Colorado that I spoke to earlier looked around and he said, I don't see a lot of farm workers here. And I think that point is well taken too, as we're thinking about exploring different technologies and state of the line, really you can't believe it if you can't see it. And if you can't see it, then how are you going to participate in it? So yeah, I think we need more intentionality behind it.
I also am going to mention on that point, we can't not name kind of the state of immigration as relates to farm workers right now. The goal for this panel, so we're clear, was to have farm workers, and folks don't really feel comfortable traveling right now. So like that needs to be named, I think, and doesn't get named enough often. But to transition a little bit into where we're really going here, and where we think we could end up with technology, I hear a lot of people say we're going to fully automate things. I'm guessing that we're all thinking there are people in the future, but can paint me a picture, like 5-10 years out, and maybe, and you've spoken least recently, so I'm going to throw it to you to start us on this, and then please disagree with each other also in this, is my ask for you. But
Is this an aspirational 5 to 10 years out, or like best case scenario?
go best case scenario.
Okay.
And
What
we'll,
I think
and
is
we'll,
possible?
We'll attack it a little bit.
Okay,
yeah.
fine. Yeah, this is a really good question. I spend a lot of my time thinking about this because I really care about ag robotics because I care about rural communities and the people that it impacts. I think there's so much promise in technology if it's well thought out, balanced, the rollout is innovative and inclusive and involves everybody. But I think the bigger question we have to ask, and this has kind of been a shift in my thinking over the last 5 years, is not just what's possible when it comes to technology, but how do we make it matter in the lives of the people who depend upon agriculture for their livelihoods across the board, the producers, the workers, the regional economies, the chemical consultants. These are very important questions. And so My hope in 5 years, I don't think we will be fully automated. I think this is a stride that is a great goal. There's some big challenges we face, and this is a possibility, but there are many steps in that process. And so in 5 years, what I hope to see is a continued evolving conversation about this, more ag tech companies engaging with workers and producers and early, and understanding how inputting this new technology would impact industry-wide, the shakeups that occurs upstream. I think that's, important. I want to see them also addressing the needs of the people in this system. Farmers and farm workers know what they need, they know what works, and they know what they want. And we have to start having this conversation early. And I do work not just in California, but across the nation. And I have to say one of the best kernels of knowledge I heard was out of the Washington Tree Fruit Research Commission, where in a committee meeting, they're like, we have to stop pretending we know what this looks like. We need to figure out that there are many pathways to innovation. So that's my hope for 5 years. In 10 years, I hope we're really thinking more systemically about these tools and the policies that are needed and having real and meaningful conversations in that way. I think that I would like to also see us move beyond an us versus them discourse in very many different varieties of aspects here, not just farmer versus tech, but tech versus system, tech versus production system. And I think that is possible. And I think it begins with a very simple step, and that is who do you include and how early you include them. And basically, my hope in 10 years is that there is no ag tech conversation without a grower or a worker at the table.
I think, Connie, asking that question, the way you did it, is trying to oversimplify a very extremely
Yes.
complex industry. If you tell me, how do you see things, I will tell you in what crop, in what country, in what hemisphere, in what...
Go specific. How do
Yeah.
you see your FLCs?
Yeah, so for example, the crops that I work with traditionally are highly labor intensive for obvious reasons. So I'm in stone fruit and grapes, I'm in kiwis, pomegranates, citrus, and so forth, right? So in 5 to 10 years, I see some adaptation of the robotics to simplify certain cultural activities, right? Like automated sprayers and so forth. But when you try to utilize mechanical harvesting in some of those crops, you can see the end result in the vines, in the final product, so we are nowhere near finding a solution that will replace human beings in those crops, right? So I think we will be slowly implementing certain things, but I was sharing with Anne, it's like after being interacting with now a couple of events of this nature, I'm seeing an awesome business opportunity for my business to go into micro-innovation, right, that will help my employees to actually get an edge over other FLCs to perform similar jobs by developing new technology or implements that will make their jobs easier and consequently have better results for my customers.
Let's dig into that thread a little bit more, because I totally agree. And I'm going to ask Karen for you to chime in on this too, because is RFLC is the pathway or kind of market pathway for a lot of these solutions?
I have even offered ourselves to be the guinea pigs of some of those solutions. I mean, again, trying to bet for the all or nothing, replacing and eliminating the workforce at once, I think is not necessarily the fastest way to get there, actually, because it will require a lot of trial and error to get to the ideal solution. If you develop your product with your customer in mind, under the conditions in which we operate, because you are facing weather, you are facing different types of terrain, you are facing different levels of skills within the end users and so forth. So it's not, I think it's actually paramount that anybody that wishes to develop new technology to be implemented in the ag industry need to go through either an FLC or directly with a company to actually develop a solution that works for the people that we're trying to serve. I have been offering, again, for example, it's very simple. It's not robotics, but it's a little bit of technology. In one of my companies, we were doing timekeeping and productivity tracking with paper for 7,000 employees. So it's like, no, it's impossible. How the heck do you? We went ahead and obviously implemented it not only for us, but also for all the FLCs. And now we are offering our customers to actually use those for them to actually get to know the technology so they can implement it in their businesses. Because we see the value of having technology available to serve your business.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense to me. And I'll mention the one other piece of it is you get more iterations in the context of an FLC. I'm curious, Pete, like if, just theoretical, if a product is trusted by an FLC, how would that impact your perception?
I mean, I think it's a matter of anybody proving something out, right? When we went through the mechanical sorting process in the kind of, I don't remember exactly, it's like early 2000s, the technology didn't exist, and one of the things that we worked with the company on is competitors, anybody can come in and learn, and we'll show them the equipment, and because these companies needed scale, it's like, that's great, we can build 4 pieces of equipment for you, but we need to sell 400 of these. So I think that collaboration, and we're in a very, I don't want to offend anybody, but I mean, the industry we're in is pretty tight. Like, people don't like to open up their businesses to show what they're doing.
Yeah.
So that was in the next 5 years, is people need to get more open to showing the technology, because we're really talking about solving industry problems, not competitive advantages. People will figure out how to take them and turn them into competitive advantages, but we want it to be fully ingrained into the industry. You hit on something that is, in my mind, is we have so much variability in our crops. You grow lettuce and sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small, sometimes it's upright, sometimes it's, there's a lot of varietal things that we need to figure out how they're going to interact with the technology, because it's not a kind of a one-size-fits-all deal. The other thing is you brought up, and I want to, highlight, is weather, right? When we went to mechanical harvesting, not robotic harvesting, but mechanical harvesting, you still needed crews, because if the weather wasn't permitting, you still need to get the crop out, and that became really, really tricky. That if you eliminate or dramatically reduce the workforce, and then you have a week when you need them, you're backed up on crops, because you can't just flip back to the old way to do it. And that's what I think needs to get figured out, is the functionality, and then how do you actually implement without interruption to your business, because we gotta do what we do from a finished product standpoint 365 days a year.
You're highlighting on like a really big problem in robot automation stuff, which is if you get one task accomplished 80% of the time, you actually still need people to do all the other stuff all the rest of the time.
Yeah.
I have no solutions to that problem. And does anyone have any solutions to that problem? Ideas? How do we solve that?
I think artificial intelligence is going to help a little bit breaching some of those gaps. Obviously, right now, the artificial intelligence is quite dumb, actually, but we'll get there at some point, right? We forget that we are working in an industry with living organisms, right? And they are very different from one another. Pruning one tree, one way, doesn't necessarily work on the tree that is next to that tree. So you need to actually have a way to think, process, and decide what branches to cut, so you actually have a good yield 6 months after you did the pruning. So I think that's going to help a little bit to bridge robotics with the activities that need to happen, but it's still, I think, very early in the development of that specific technology.
I mean, listening to Oscar made me think of a conversation I've had in different iterations with different growers across commodities. And the key to that, too, is research prior to that about, like, does variability matter in pruning, right? Do we need uniformity in pruning, or can humans don't do it all in the exact same way? So maybe, 3 tasks with one at 30, 40, and one at 80 is fine for now, and knowing that this will be an iterative thing. But getting to the end goal, perfection, isn't the first step, right? You have to have this iterative process. And so I think AI will get there, but I also think we need to have a conversation about how do you work the field? What exactly do you need? Like, what are your what's your range here? And get at that. And part of that is really going back to some old industrial relations studies on farms. How do these processes occur? What are workers doing? What are the innovations that are occurring? And I also think key to that is an acceptance that the near, if not near long-term future of ag labor is hybrid.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point. On the AI point too, I don't know, Karen, if you're like, I've had a lot of conversations in the context of startup world, and I also want to give the audience notice that in a minute or two here, we'll turn to audience questions, so start brewing them. But AI, obviously, analysts, a lot of these kind of like entry stage jobs, desk jobs, are being displaced by AI and AI agents right now. I also do a lot of work with kind of an entrepreneurial fellowship program, and we're thinking a lot about actually what's useful to a startup company, especially, I don't know if we've talked much during this conference about the capital stack and the need to be kind of lean and how do we finance some of these robotics companies because they're expensive to build. But there's an opportunity to make your startup company more efficient through leveraging AI in a certain capacity. Sure. But in order to be able to do that, you need to be able to use the tools, right? Like, you need to be able to go in and leverage ChatGPT or Claude or pick your poison of AI tool. And I know you're doing a lot of work on, you're including kind of computer literacy training elements. Are you starting yet, or has there been any conversation about how do you start to engage actually with AI such that you can, because part of my grand scheme here, to be transparent, is I want all of the companies I invest in to have farm workers, or I don't know if you want to call them former farm workers if they're now at a tech company, but working with those companies directly. And I'm curious if that's a component of it, because I think that's like an essential skill, actually, and it will be for farms as well.
Well, I think there's 2 ways to look at it, because I think people are increasingly getting worried about AI in education, right? How you have graduates that now, what do they say about your doctors? Like, they all use ChatGPT to graduate. That's a scary notion. And I think when we think about in our workforce programs, training the workforce is training people on what they actually can perform rather than what they could maybe do on a test or type out in a paper. I think that's going to be increasingly important. But do we have AI in the curriculum that we're building? No, but as soon as it rolled out, it felt like everyone is using AI, the instructors to translate things in English, to create open educational resources, the students to understand what the instructors are saying. So they are utilizing AI as, in many ways, as we hope people will utilize technology, as an instrument, not as the end-all be-all, but as a way to facilitate their learning. And yeah, I think they're excited about it. We have, 60, 70-year-old farm workers that are excited about AI, and we're in a generation where, millennial, Gen X, boomers, AI and technology has made our lives a lot easier. We don't have to use, maps anymore. We have GPS. We have cell phones. We don't have landlines. But I think I think that's great on the farm worker side, but I think we have, you know, Gen Z coming up that's saying, how is technology going to make it better? Not just like, great, I have a cell phone now. And how are, like, a really utilitarian perspective on that? Like, what is going to be the best use for this? I think the combination of those multiple generations working together is really going to be the sweet spot for AI.
Yeah, but I want to make sure, and we go into one other point that we talk about a lot, which is zooming out a little bit into the like net economic development implications. Because, like, again, to name a real thing, there will be job loss as a consequence of some form of adoption. But I'm passing it to you because you know what I'm asking.
This is something that I think is important to say out loud, and that is that we will experience job loss, and we cannot create the number of new jobs through tech that we would have had in the field. We will also have systemic effects rolling over as well. You have entire towns. Think about it this way. Our experience of automation as a nation has been automobile and manufacturing. So we can all think of a Detroit or a Flint, Michigan, where a town hollows out because the enterprise leaves. We will have ripple effects of changing production paradigms. We will have ripple effects of losing farms, and that is something that we need to come to terms with. Tech has a very important role to play to ensure that we still remain very viable as a state in this sector, that this industry still remains strong in these areas. But we also have to recommit ourselves to figuring out and opening up opportunities to retrain, figure out where jobs growth is going to happen, perhaps transferring outside of ag, right? And that requires us to be committed to building pathways and opening up opportunities, coming up with really informal ways of getting, informal meaning not your traditional educational sectors, but retraining workers for new roles on the farm, for new roles in their local economies, and then to address the fact that you're going to have business loss across the board. This is something we're also having in other sectors as well, right, as we watch AI shock. And I think the importance of that is that you've got to build regions then that can have adaptive management, adaptive resilience, and it means that we need policy that can be very smart and nimble. So that means a lot of policy experimentation and a lot of work where we don't get into gridlock, essentially.
Can I challenge a little bit that view? And
Sure.
I have no scientific background here and no studies, but the only thing that I can think of is we talk about job loss, right? However, since the Industrial Revolution, the very basic intention is to produce more with less, and to eliminate the workforce, right? And yet, we are talking today, Pete mentioned, labor scarcity. So how can you, right, marry the two terms? You have job loss versus labor scarcity. But I think that the term, what you just said, and is not job loss, it's job transformation, I think. And it's what we do in order to prepare these individuals, in order to adapt their skills to the future needs of our community. So it's not, I just don't see it as a job loss, I see it as a job transformation, and we need to help these communities, right, to get there.
And I'll point out that you just pointed to what I said I don't want to have happen, and that is I did the us versus them, right? So there is a way to transform this conversation where it's no longer about replacement, but it's about transforming.
Right.
And that is the conversation you need to have. You will lose jobs. We will have occupations that aren't around.
That's
I mean, that's a thing.
Can I say something about this? Because I think we make the assumption that everyone wants to work in ag. And that's just not the case. It's a means to an end for a lot of people. And when we say they're going to lose that job, to them, if you go into any rural community and ask them like what your dream job is, they'll tell you whatever job is paying well. And so it's not a choice there. And so I think if we can shift our way of thinking and saying, how can we train in skills? We need healthcare workers, right? We're transforming. We're creating jobs in a climate economy as well. what are the foundational skills in agriculture that can branch out to those other opportunities? Because in those surveys, we know that 40% of farm workers want to be in healthcare, and maybe it is a lot of the women, but they do, and they don't have a pathway to that. So what if we think about better aligning so that those people that do want to be in ag have every opportunity and every pathway to succeed in it? And I think that's like, we have to stop thinking about it as, here's what we have. We're very reactive to that. And so I think it's a both and. I think there's an opportunity here to get better aligned. And I'll just say, and you didn't ask me this question, but I think we need to start thinking about innovation in 5 years, thinking about the social and environmental piece of it, right? We say innovation a lot in technology for production and to get larger margins, but what if we said, you know, we have the dirtiest air in the central San Joaquin Valley in the nation? What if we said, what if innovation gives us the cleanest air? What if we made these big, bold goals to reach, and we integrate it and we incentivize that, not regulate it, and bring everyone to the table? I think we can solve a lot of problems that way.
I definitely agree with that. And I'm going to turn it over to audience questions. I'm going to add one last piece, which is to basically yes and, I think, everything you guys just said. What if we can use technology to make work in agriculture attractive for everyone at every level, because we really are bleeding talent in ag all across the board, and if we can create basically more fluidity between other occupations, because ag is over here. I grew up in New Jersey. My sisters who live in New York City, like, think I'm a farmer because I work in ag tech, which gives you just the sense of the way that most folks think about this industry. It's like so out there to most people, and it shouldn't be. And we have an opportunity to leverage technology with people to fully change that, such that it's just as normal to be a farmer or a farm worker as a doctor or a nurse. And with that, do we have any questions? I don't know, do we have a mic to pass around in the back? I'm going to say really project extremely.
I can try to yell. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm a professor in AI and robotics, just to give you a bit of where I'm coming from. And I have this question about replacement all the time. And I also talk about job fit. And I think one of the things I'd like to hear from the panel about is future thinking, right? So if we think, you know, where we are with AI and robotics in terms of being on farms is at least 5 years, maybe 10 years away. So think about not the kids who are 18 now, but the kids who are 10 next. Like, what do you say to them to start thinking about a career, you know, 10, 20 years from now? What's your vision of where the farm should be, not solving today's problems, but where you want the problems to be in 20 years?
Pete.
I'm at a little disadvantage because my hearing's
has
not that
kids?
great.
Who has kids?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what are you telling your kids?
My daughter wants to own her own pest management business. So I think, you know, growing up in rural communities, a lot of people have to leave to follow their dreams, right? And they think about technology, and they think about urban areas. So I think that drives in your point a little bit. But I don't think even in rural communities we do a good enough job in our K-12 educational systems identifying the opportunities, right? Someone is learning about computers. Someone is learning about very, very specific things, but not in applied context right now, right? So someone might think they want to be in data science and they're going to go and work for a tech company, but there's an opportunity in ag. So I think what I see is an opportunity for people to stay in their own communities, and seeing what those are really early on is key, because really people don't know that these opportunities are there. I don't think anyone, I mean, maybe you know what AI and robotics is going to look like more than anybody in this room. I think we can imagine, we can dream, but I think we just have to expose our children to that even being a possibility, because that is what happens. They just don't know, and it's too late. They think healthcare, they think about traditional roles, and we're just not there anymore.
It's a cultural and social thing that you're hitting on. We have to re-socialize what ag labor is and what agriculture looks like for the future. And anybody who's in agriculture now says it's getting more tech, more driving, more tech savvy. You need to have skills to be able to, handle a lot of data or process information. And I think that is going to require a fundamental shift in terms of how society views ag and ag communities. Growing up also in rural areas and a frontier community, so a population of 500 people, it was clear that there were opportunities on the farm, but many of us left. We came back mostly, but that's also something as well. If the talent pool comes back, what can they do to spur kind of the understanding of what these regions are? So I think there's the agricultural responsibility to articulate what the future looks like, and then more broadly, we have a general public responsibility to talk about what these jobs could look like, to better bridge that gap between the farm and the city and realities
Marketing
there.
problem.
Yep.
Well, it's a marketing problem. It's a
But it's also-
relationship problem.
yeah.
Also, because when I have these conversations with AI tech investor world, the two things that everyone who's investing in AI are focusing on for their kids are critical thinking and emotional intelligence and relationships, because that's how you continue to be relevant in the workforce. Actually.
People will call them soft skills, but they're increasingly being called durable skills. So I think it's a good way of reframing.
We probably have time for one, maybe two more questions. Yeah.
I work for CDFA, and it says regulation in the panel name, and you guys have mentioned things like incentivation, not regulation, policy that can be smart and nimble, potentially building pathways to career transformation or transition. What, if any, would the ideal role of government be in this kind of autonomous tech transition in agriculture over the next 5 to 10 years? How could government support that?
I think that, and it's been mentioned here, I think, a couple of times, I think we need to eliminate the us versus them mentality, right? Sometimes we see regulation very punitive in nature, and being the agencies there to catch you, right, on things that you are doing wrong, and therefore I'm going to find you. And I think we need to change the rhetoric. It's no longer about us versus them situation. In order to resolve the challenges in agriculture, it needs to be a systemic approach. There needs to be laws and regulations that make sense to the reality of the businesses that we have out there. So they need to walk on our shoes in order to understand what are the challenges managing people out there and trying to do our business. Pete mentioned it. We operate in very small and narrow margins, and we operate under very difficult and challenging environment. So it's about coming together, understanding what are the different angles of challenges and how we all put our heads together to face those problems. While I was the Chief Human Resources Officer for one of the companies, is okay, let's keep OSHA out. Let's keep OSHA out. And then when I came and took the leadership, it's like, no, just bring them in. Let's certify our plants as a safe place to work. Let's certify our fields because that's actually the message that I want to send my employees and the community in general, right? And then that's exactly what we did. As you may know, the OSHA has the branch of doing consulting and all that, and we certify our plants as in the VPP plan and so forth. So it's about changing that rhetoric and how we see each other, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's always a compliance side that needs to be monitored to make sure that everybody is doing what they should be doing. But I think we utilize the consulting. So I think that educational partnering with solving some of the problems along with the compliance, I think
Yeah.
needed.
Let me give you just an example. We were forced, based on regulations, to have artificial shade, right? And yet some of our employees work under trees. And we were trying to have a conversation with OSHA to let them know is if you put an artificial shade, you are going to actually create an steam room in there, and you are going to have harsher conditions for the employees. It doesn't make sense, right? It's come, and then we started actually taking the temperature under the shade of a tree versus under the shade of an artificial shade. So that's kind of, there needs to be openness to understand that not one thing fits all, and that we can adapt and adjust certain regulations and certain laws, processes to actually accomplish the end goal. I think everybody's goal in that particular point is to keep the employees safe. We are equally interested in ensuring that my employees go home safe and sound, right? So let's work together to accomplish that.
Yeah, echoing what I'm hearing is, again, it's relationship-based, and it has to stop being us versus them. I know again, the autonomy issue is an issue in the state. I know CDFA knows that. And the one other piece that, again, has to get named is we're talking about automation. We also have to talk about immigration. And so, that also needs to be named. And okay, we have 1 minute left. Because we're not going to have robots doing all of this work anytime soon, and also it is hugely disruptive to agriculture to be in a constant environment of fear. So name that. And then finally, I think that the role that CDFA can actually play is really in enabling and fostering more of the relationship-driven connections from regulatory and farmers, from farm workers and tech, all that kind of connective tissue, because no one in this space is that far away from one another, but the perception sometimes is that we are. And relationships are the only thing that will solve that, I think. With that, can I please get a round of applause for these panelists? And thank you.
Thank you, Connie.